I wonder if you've ever thought to yourself, why do I need to keep pretending? I think a lot of social pressure and relational issues are strongly linked to the inability for people to be authentic. I think that authenticity is actually a real rare thing in our culture and in our society. And if you look at most of the child messages that we've received since childhood, from parents and media and friends, it becomes clear that there's this one compelling message that we all receive. And I don't think it's just our generation, I think it's generations untold back. And that basic message is that you are not enough. So join me as I try to explain to you the problems with this idea and how to change it. Feeling you're not enough is a foundational wound with everybody that I've mentored or spoken to or got to know deeply over the years. And I'm no exception to the rule, and that's probably why this is such a big issue for me. A lot of us think we're not smart enough, we're not good looking enough, maybe we're not strong enough, we don't have the right body, maybe we think we're not working hard enough, we haven't succeeded enough in our careers. And basically, in short, it's just the idea that we are not enough. This is a really bad way to build, this is a really bad foundation to build self-worth on, isn't it? I really think it's almost like the original sin in society. It's passed on from generation to generations, thousands of generations back. We're all just continually modeling this belief system that we're not enough and passing it to our children, and they're growing up with it and they're passing it to their children. And society is just repeating the same old mistake. I wouldn't be surprised if the feeling that we are not enough is the foundational cause of a majority of the problems in society and in ourselves and in relationships. Because how can you build a good foundation on this wound and a lie? I want to convince you that it's a lie. So much of human industry and achievement, if you think about it, is probably based on the idea that I am not enough. Why do you get up every day and go to work? Why do you try to achieve greater success in your life and in your relationships? Why do you try to draw people to yourself? It's probably a lot of the time because you feel like that's how you're going to prove that you're okay. I think in our 40s, we get to the point where we've been trying for the last 20 years to show and prove that we're good enough, and we're following all the rules and we're doing it all the right way, and it's still not working. How long am I going to have to keep trying to prove that I'm enough and not get the answer that I want? That yes, you are enough because now you've achieved this level of success or this amount of money or this sort of value in your relationship. So, that's what I think the foundation of a lot of midlife crisis is that you start realizing the game isn't working. I'm not getting what I want. I'm not getting a sense of I'm okay at the end of the day. Now, I don't think necessarily we're thinking that that's what we're trying to achieve, but if you dig down, and the people that I've worked with over the years, and I've heard this from all over the place, this is a new idea, that at the basic of it all is that we just don't feel like we're okay. Now, if you're living a life where you think that the way to be okay is to achieve or to have lots of people love you or to gain possessions, I want to tell you this really bad news. And after I tell you the bad news, I'm going to tell you some good news. And the bad news is you will never achieve a sense that I am okay if you think you can achieve it. If you think you're the one who can gain this as a possession by achieving and by making friends and by gaining possessions, the bad news is you will never ever achieve that. You are literally in a type of hell because you are running around doing things that you don't want to do to gain something that you will never get. And if that's not a definition of hell, I don't know what is. That is literally the rat race. You are running after something, and it's so elusive, but also it also seems like you're just about to get it. Yeah, oh, there it is. It's like the greyhound running the race, trying to catch the rabbit. It's not even a real rabbit. And they just feel like they're just about to get it. I just got to run a little faster. I just got to be a little better. I've got to be a bit stronger. I've got to be a bit more handsome or prettier. I've got to just get the right relationship. And then I'll have it. I'll have happiness. I'll be okay, finally. And it just makes you run and run and run. And after a while, you know, some of us start to doubt whether that's true. And that's actually the beginning of growing up. I think that is a really positive thing to happen in your life. Disillusionment with that lie. But the problem is all of society seems to be caught up in it. For generations, for thousands of years, we've been caught up in this lie. But deep down in our souls, we know that can't be right. That can't be the answer. We know that there's something more than running a race to prove that I'm okay. Okay, I want to make it really clear to you that you're not going to gain self-acceptance through achievements, through running the rat race. And I want to show it to it this way. This is my example. Say you achieve some level of success in any area of your life, okay? Now for a while, and this has been my experience and those I've talked to, you have a moment, you have time where you actually feel pretty good about yourself. You know, you've done that, you've achieved that goal, you've gained this thing. And in that moment of success, what you've got to realize, what you could reflect on in that moment is the reason you feel okay about yourself is because you have proven yourself to be a little bit better than this person. This is them, this is you. You're playing a game of comparisons. Now, that is not going to last because deep down you know that that is a totally arbitrary comparison and that there are lots and lots of people better than you. You're going to feel good about being better than them until you see this person who's better than you. So you put all this effort and strength into proving that you're better than this person, so you have an inflated sense of self-importance and I'm better than them, I feel better for a moment. It's like a little hit, a little drug input that gives you a little hit of self-acceptance, a little that you start to feel it tangibly, this is what it feels like to be okay with myself. The problem is you know that it's so fragile because you are just 1 second away, one comparison away from feeling bad about yourself all over again. Now you've got to be a little bit better to beat this guy. And then you've got to be better to beat this guy. And so on and so on. And social media is always showing us people being happier, being more beautiful, being more successful. All the time you're just bombarded with people that you realise, God, I'm not that good. How bad do you feel when your mate's up there and everything's just going perfect for their life? You know, they're in the perfect situation, they're looking good, they've been working out, they're eating well, their marriage and their family's going well. You look at them and you go, oh, you just feel crap, don't you? And you know, that is a real hell that we put ourselves through when we base our self-worth on what we do, on what people say and what we own. If you get on that rat race and the whole of humanity is caught up in it, let's face it, most people are doing this 24/7, you are just putting yourself through hell. And you'll never, this is the news you have to realize, you will never achieve enough to feel enough. If you can get that, the race will never end. You will never get the little hare that the greyhound's running after. You're a spectacle. You know, we're all just being a spectacle to each other. We're all putting on our act. We're all playing our games. We're role playing. And it's just endless and pointless. And the sooner you realise that, the better. I want to talk about the concept of false self because I think that is a really helpful idea that might release you from this rat race. Now, the false self would probably be best described as an identity that we build up apart from who we really are. As children, we build an identity from what we like and what we don't like, for what we accept as us and what we reject as not being us. So for example, we might say, I like cats, but I don't like dogs, because at some stage in your life, you just decided as a 2-year-old that that's what you were going to like. Or maybe it's, I like Christians, but I don't like Muslims, because that's your culture. Okay, so you're brought up in that culture. I like this group, I don't like that group. Maybe it's, I like Australians, but I don't like Asians. Okay, maybe it's, I like ice cream, but I don't like, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just this arbitrary decision that you make about yourself. This is what I like, that's what I don't like. That's what I'm rejecting, This is what I'm accepting. You start to realize that this identity that you're forming is actually mostly based on what you don't like. It's based on what you've rejected and put out of your life and have shut yourself off to. And it becomes smaller and smaller as you get older, until you get to a point where you can be this elderly person who's very, very difficult to be with, because you have this little rigorous life. It has to all fit into it, and if it doesn't fit into it, you're not happy, okay? You can become very, very difficult to please because you've built this identity based on what you like and you don't like. Now, we all do it. It just takes a trip overseas for you to start to realize, oh my goodness, what is my identity? For example, I lived in South Korea for 2 years teaching English. And while I was there, I got culture shock. We all get culture. That's what culture shock is. It's when our identities are like, wow, I thought that was the truth. I thought that was how everything was. For example, just a silly example, I remember lining up in a shop. In New Zealand, Australia, you just line up and people just like take turns to get the stuff. I'll line up, waiting there, and an older lady comes and pushes in front of me, and I'm thinking, how rude these Koreans are. Like, what is up with that? Pushing in front of me, when in fact, I was the one who was rude because I wasn't giving place to elderly people. Elderly people in that culture are highly respected and they get to do things first. That's just the way it works there, and this is the way it works in Australia, and who's to say what's right and wrong about those? They're just cultural identities. But until you start to see that the world isn't like you, the world is a variety, a spectrum of identities, and the little identity that you formed isn't you. And that is the key concept. You have to realize that your identity has been built on arbitrary cultural beliefs, arbitrary family beliefs, and things that you've just personally decided you like and don't like. And the more you identify with this false identity, this false self, and think that that is you, the more rigid and the more unable to change and adapt, and the more you have, the bigger the group of people you don't like will be. The bigger the group of people who are you can non-humanize. You can say they're not really human because they belong to that group and we don't like that group. And so we form our identity by what we don't like a lot of the time, more than even what we do like. And as we get older, like I said, it gets smaller and smaller, and that's the false self. Now, I'm not saying the false self is bad, because we need to have some way of navigating through the matrices of our own culture. We need to know all the thousands of rules of what's okay and what's not okay, and culture's good, but the problem is when you think that you are the false self and that is all you are. And if you think you're the false self, you're going to feel very, very insecure, because part of you knows that you made that self and therefore it has no real substance or structure. The false self is false because its foundations are built on nothing but arbitrary choices which are very strongly influenced by your culture. It doesn't really exist. It's a fantasy, and it's built from preferences that are untested and assumptions about who we are. It's sometimes referred to as the egoic self. And like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you think you are the egoic self, you are the false self, that's the prison. That's the rat race. That's the personal hell that most of us are getting stuck in all the time. And so what's the good news? If you can start to step back from the false self, and prayer and meditation are very effective methods, doing work on personal development is very helpful. Traveling is very helpful. Anything that gets you and shocks you out of your identity. Suffering is very helpful. Great love is very helpful. Anything that draws you out of yourself and starts to pressure you to look and realize that your little self-identity is not the universe. That is not even you, because you can change it. If you can change it, if you formed the false self, you are not the false self. This is the false self, and here's me. And I think that you can start to realize that there's a little bit of space between you and the false self, and you start to live in the true self. Now, the true self would be the consciousness or the being that you are when you were born. Okay? The consciousness that formed this false identity. This is the you. This is the I, the subject. We often, in a sentence, we go, I like blah, 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 right? So I like ice cream. I is the true self. Like is in some ways the false self. And then whatever comes after that. I is the subjective. That is the person that you are that is relating to the world through an egoic self. And that egoic self is helpful. We need it. We need to be able to identify it. It's our small self is another way of putting it rather than false self. False self is good because it addresses the problem that most society has, that we think the false self is us. So that's why it could be called the false self. But the small self is another way of looking at it. But there's a consciousness behind the small self or the false self or the ego that you need to step back into and start to look at the world through that. And that is a process that will happen, like I said, through suffering, through great love, through meditation, through spiritual practices that help you step back and take a look, cultural shock and things like that. So when we step back and we look at ourselves, we look at our false self and we look at the world from our true self, we have eyes of compassion. We stop judging, I like, I don't like, good, bad. We start to see that it's a bit more complicated than that. We start to see ourselves as and accept ourselves as we are. We start to see that we are not what we do, we are not what we possess, we are not what people say we are. We start to see that we are something else. We're a consciousness that has come into this world, and that we are the ones who have judged ourselves as not being good enough. If you can realize this, and it takes time and it takes suffering and it takes self-work, if you start to realize that you're the one who's saying you're not enough, then you can start to realize, maybe I am enough already. Maybe I was enough the moment I was born. If you were enough the moment you were born, you will stop doing things to prove that you're enough, and you'll start doing things as an expression of authenticity. And that's where I come back to this concept of authenticity. Your authentic self is what the world needs. Your authentic self is what will build true relationship. Being your authentic self is what brings peace and joy into your life. And I think it's a lifelong journey, and I certainly haven't achieved it, but I'm starting to see how important it is, and I want to share that with you. I would hope that I would start to put some little ideas, some thoughts into your mind to help you realize that you are not your false self. You are not this identity that you've formed. You're something much greater, and that you're able to accept that you are enough from the day you came into this world. You don't have to prove it to anybody. Do things because that is an expression of who you are, and then life will be filled with much more passion. People will relate to you in a more real way, and I think that we start to break out of this little rat race of trying to prove we're good enough and just never achieving that. I mean, who wants to keep doing that? If you want to keep doing it, well, you're going to keep doing it, aren't you? But I'd hope I put a little bit of doubt in your mind that that's ever going to work, and that you would start to go down that journey of self-acceptance and realizing that who you are, your true self, is enough. It's been good sharing with you. It's James here from Upgrade Me Mentor. If you like, I hope you could subscribe, share with others, and check out my articles on LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm doing 45-minute free mentor sessions at the moment. I'll put the link down there. I hope you try those out. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, we can do it over the internet, and people have done it, found it very helpful. And I've also got an audio series that I'd like you to have a look at on my Facebook page there. How Our Minds Create Reality. It's a 60-minute audio that you can purchase, and it really goes through some of these concepts in more depth. And soon I'll be starting a 6-week school, and I hope that if you're interested in that, you can share that with me. It's been good talking to you. Have a good day.